We transitioned into some slower music, into worship, and I remember for a short session, Travis came up and he began to speak, and after he started speaking, then Ryan Bain came up, and what do you know, when he came up, he had a spontaneous word dealing with bitterness. And so I'm pacing back and forth, and I'm like, okay, Lord, I know that this is for me. This is for me. And in the moment, to be honest, I almost didn't move. I almost didn't budge, because it was probably pride, because it's like, well, God will work out. He'll work this out on his own timing. Over time, as I continue to grow in Him, He'll work out bitterness in me. But I couldn't resist, because I desperately wanted to be free from bitterness. I went up to the altar, and as soon as I got there, I heard Ryan say the words, "And some of you are bitter towards your parents," and that was enough. I was absolutely wrecked. I mean, I remember in that moment just really crying out, screaming, and it was just a release. It was a release of letting the Holy Spirit take the axe to bitterness, and me releasing unforgiveness, and me releasing emotions that I carried around since I was 6 years old.
I'm a new mom. So I have a 7-month-old, and for the past few months I've developed what doctors call de Quervain syndrome, and it's a mix of sort of like arthritis and tendonitis. Several months ago, when I started having pain in my wrist, I didn't quite know what they called it yet. I thought that I had just sprained both of my wrists somehow, so I was kind of just toughing it out, hoping that it would go away on its own. The pain continued to get worse. About this past November, we were driving back from Thanksgiving holiday visiting with some family, and this wrist in particular was quite painful, so much more than the right hand. And on our way back, I'm sitting in the front seat, chatting with my husband, and I look down and I notice there is a knot that has formed on my left wrist bone. So I was still sort of crestfallen and frustrated and discouraged. So I go home, and a few days later, we had family over, so I was kind of distracted by that. I'm laying in my bed in our bedroom with our 6-month-old, and I'm just laying there, and I have a book with healing scriptures in it. And at the same time, my 6-month-old had a wound that had happened on her finger. And so I was just laying there reading the scriptures over her and sort of, inviting her to pray along with me. I'm just chatting with her, reading the scriptures to her and myself. And I look at her and I say, I'm reading the scriptures out loud over our bodies. And I said, Lima, I said, Mommy and you are going to believe for healing. One for my wrist and one for your finger. And she just looked at me and smiled as if she was agreeing with me. About an hour later, I was giving her bath, and as I'm giving her bath, I look down on my wrist, and the cyst is gone. And Robert, my husband, wasn't at home at the time, and I'm periodically looking down on my wrist and rubbing, and I'm thinking, it's really gone. The knot is not there. And I'm pushing and pushing and pushing to try to make myself feel pain, and it's gone. So the cyst was completely disappeared, hasn't came back, it's not coming back. So
before I left the altar, I heard the Lord say, take the girls and go to Connie's and pray for her. Connie is a friend of mine. She lives in New Albany. They were sure she possibly had cancer. They had done a biopsy, took 4 lymph nodes out of her neck, and that upcoming Tuesday, she was going and get the doctor's report. So Connie came out, and I just said, Connie, we just came from church, and at the altar, God said, take the girls and go pray for Connie. And with that, she smiled. And she said, oh, Susan, she said, this morning in prayer, God told me He was sending somebody to pray for me. She said, I didn't know who, I didn't know when, but here you are. So I called her up, and sure enough, no cancer. even though they were pretty sure it was,